And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome. It's time for another exciting episode of IT Career in Australia channel. And tonight's topic is what to expect when moving to management role in IT industry. So thank you so much for finding some time for joining me. I've been away for a few weeks, so excited to be back. And excited to see you here. So please don't forget to introduce yourselves in the comments. Let us know what you do and join our conversation with your questions and comments. Or at least please say hi in the comments so we know you're here and you're listening to us. So I'm Jana Martins, and I'm working in IT consultancy at the moment. So I'm passionate about learning more about present and future of the tech industry. So, and obviously sharing it with you on this channel. As I said, tonight we're talking about what to expect when moving to management role in IT industry. And Lindsay is going to share his story, his experience, his challenges, some surprises he had during his career. And obviously how he overcome those surprises and challenges. So please make sure tag and share this video with your colleagues and friends who might be thinking to move to management role but have some hesitation or maybe not sure where to start. So before I'll pass it over to Lindsay to introduce himself, just wanted to remind you quickly, as usual, we're streaming live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. If you miss the stream, no worries. You can always watch the replay on my YouTube channel, IT Career in Australia. So I'm going live there every Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Melbourne time with various experts from my network. And we're covering broad range of topics around job search, in and outs of IT industry in Australia, some hiring techniques, and so on. So there is a few playlists there that you can check out. And obviously, I also encourage you to join my meetup group so you can get notifications for upcoming events as well. And I always encourage you to use this live stream not only to get some new information, but network with people in the industry. So you can, network with people in the comments, or also reach out to some speakers. Whereas, people always open to network. So, and yeah, I encourage you to ask as many questions as you want on all the platforms. So anyway, that's enough of me. I'm gonna pass it on to Lindsay to introduce himself, please.
Thanks for the introduction, Jana. So my name is Lindsay Homewood. I'm the Chief Product Officer at CipherStash, and I've been in that position for about 2.5 years. I'm, funnily enough, for somebody talking about making a move from like an individual contributor into a management position, I do product management these days, but it's very technically focused. But I'm not actually leading anybody at the moment. I've actually been on a bit of sabbatical of that for the last year or two. And but funnily enough, that's actually about to change. But I do a little bit of leadership coaching on the side. I've had a wide variety of roles in the industry. A lot of it has been infrastructure and operations focused, but also leading software engineering teams at some relatively well-known companies, both domestically and internationally as well. I personally made the transition from individual contributor on the engineering side of things to a leadership role at the end of 2010. And I've mostly been doing the engineering leadership since then. I did make a bit of a detour into product management in a couple of years ago, but that was mostly on like super technical products. It's not like your traditional look at product management. Like I always have people in the teams go like, you're a product manager. How do you know how to do this, very obscure thing in Unix or Linux or whatever? So yeah, it's still on the tools, but in working in the periphery, not working on the core of the product. That's really, I like to think about the big picture, and big part about thinking about the big picture and building great products is getting people motivated, aligned, working, rowing in the same direction to achieve great things. So yeah, that's sort of the thing that inspired me to getting into leadership in the first place.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. A few people saying hi. Snow Clip is here. I love the YouTube names. If you have a YouTube nickname, please maybe share your name in the comments. That would be great. Steve here, always looking to learn more about how I can become a better manager, especially as it become my role without any real training in it. Learned some great stuff over the years, but looking forward to picking up some new tips. Perfect. You're in the right place, Steve. Thank you guys for your comments. Again, everyone, I can see you watching, but not commenting. So please at least say hi. So, it's warm my heart that you're typing a few things. So just send me thumbs up or something. So anyway, Lindsay, thank you for this intro. Let's dive a bit more, into your experience. So you briefly mentioned that you actually transitioned into the management role about 10 years ago. So because obviously the topic today about this transition, I guess that's the story that we're gonna a bit concentrate on today. So yeah, please, I guess, tell us a little bit about that time that you actually made this move from the individual contributor to the management role. What sort of motivated you? Why you decide to do it? And basically, what was your biggest surprise?
Yeah. Okay. Oh boy, I'm glad we've got nearly an hour to talk about this stuff. We'll get through like one or two questions. So I made the shift from individual contributor to manager about at the end of 2010. So I joined a company at the time called Bulletproof Networks, which was quite well known in the managed service provider space, particularly in Australia. I joined to do to be an individual contributor, to do a bunch of software engineering and uplift of existing monitoring systems. This is before like observability was like really a thing within the industry, sort of circa late 2010. But I'd been working on some monitoring stuff, open source, in my spare time, and they hired me to be able to work on that, to be able to sort of do an uplift of their systems. But very quickly, I found that I was not actually working on any of that stuff. I was working on, I had a particular set of skills around like web scalability. So I started working on Movember. So I'm still rocking the Mo. This is actually, I don't have the Mo because of Movember. I've just, there's a whole other story that we could talk about later. But basically, my mustache is like SEO for my face these days, so I don't look like everybody else. But so I was working on Movember, and we had some really big wins that had some pretty significant availability issues in previous campaigns. And so I was working on that. We managed to achieve 100% uptime, which is the first time they'd ever managed that for a Movember campaign at that point. And I had been thinking about possibly making a move more into the management side of things. It turns out that they had also been thinking about that for me as well. And so we, at a performance review that I was having, I was said, I've been thinking about maybe trying to make more of a move into the management side of things. And the response was, that's great. We've been thinking about moving you into the management side of things too. So we're definitely on the same wavelength, which was great. It was an interesting journey. Like the first person that I hired into my team, we were all, when I joined Bulletproof, there was one person that was working remotely. By the time I finished, about 45% of the workforce was working remotely. And I built my team there to be distributed from the outset. So the first person that I hired was based down in Melbourne. And to be like really blunt about it, I didn't actually do a particularly good job of managing them. It's sort of like the first pancake that you make out of the batter is often the weirdly shaped one, and that's basically what I did for this first person that I managed. And made a bunch of mistakes and definitely spent a lot of time thinking about that and analyzing it. But Mike, if you're out there and you're listening, we're on pretty good terms, I would say, these days. And I don't think we were on bad terms at the time. Actually, I just very critical of that, but very self-critical, and spend a lot of time reflecting on what's working and what isn't. And I could see that I was really falling short. So we'll
make sure we'll send Mike this replay.
Yeah, he'd appreciate it. He'd appreciate it. I hired a couple of other people after that, and I sort of organically grew the team over the space of about 3.5-4 years. So by the time I finished up there, we had a team of about 10. Actually, I think it was 12 by the time I finished. But we were globally distributed. We had people, throughout a couple of different time zones in Australia, but we also had folks in Vietnam, Germany, the US. So we were, geographically and temporarily distributed team as well. But I look back on the time that I had a Bulletproof quite fondly because they really did give me a lot of rope to do interesting things. But there was good checks in place as well for me to be able to get feedback about what's working and what isn't. It's, to be honest, it's quite rare that you find yourself in that sort of situation where you're given that flexibility to be able to try and experiment and do different things.
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's really the story about how I got into it.
But I guess the first part of I'll try to break I ask you big questions, so I'll try to break it on the little ones. I guess the first one, what was your motivation? I mean, so I'm sure there's the people out there, they thinking, I've been, I don't know, software developer for some time. I really want to stay close to technology and tech. I maybe don't want to move to the management role, or vice versa. I really want to move to management role, but not sure what to expect. What was your motivation and thinking back then?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So, to be very blunt about it, the reason that I wanted to make a move is because I had recently, over the maybe 5 to 6 year period prior, had a lot of bad experiences with my managers, and I didn't think that they were doing a particularly good job of managing me, and not just me, but the teams that I was a part of as well. And I'm sort of poisoned by the first job that I ever had in IT, where I had a really, really good manager. It's still a mentor to this day, actually, a guy named Jim Russell. And he provided, lots of really good support and coaching. And, for somebody that was just fresh out of school, it was a really fantastic experience to get an idea about what does a good workplace look like? What are examples of bad behavior in a workplace? How do you coach and motivate people to be able to do great work? But after that experience, I was basically tainted. Every subsequent manager that I had after that, I was comparing to Jim, and they just, to be blunt, they just didn't stack up. And there are varying reasons for why that is. It's not because they're bad people or anything like that. It's just that different stages of life and different levels of competency, and it's cool. It is what it is. So yeah.
So you decide the manager's bad, I will be a better manager.
Yeah, I'm look, how hard could it be? And I wasn't entirely wrong. It was definitely hard. And it gives you a new appreciation for the work that you've seen other people put in your past when they've been managing you, and when you're faced with the same situation, what do you do? And sometimes it gives you a fresh perspective on why that person behaved the way that they did. And a lot of times you go, wow, I was faced with basically the same situation, and I made a radically different set of decisions about how to do this. And that, I think, resulted in a better outcome for everybody. So, it was, sort of having an enemy, which is the 37 Signals way of talking about it. Having an example of what you don't want to be can often be a really great way in shaping behavior and, setting you on a particular path about how you want to manage and lead people. So that's really what it came down to.
Yeah. Okay. And so when you did this transition, what was your kind of biggest surprise? What you didn't expect?
Yeah, I think I definitely underestimated the emotional toll that would have on you as a manager, being responsible for other people's welfare within the workplace. I spent a lot of time. One thing that I'd really struggled with in other organizations that I've been a part of was the amount of just general chaos and dysfunction that you have in any workplace. Some are worse than others, but not feeling like I was appropriately shielded from sort of broader organizational, atmospherics and headwinds and whatnot. And so I put a lot of focus on sort of being the shit umbrella for the team. And that does take quite a big emotional toll. And it wasn't something that I really expected. And one thing that I've sort of since learned from that was that it's not enough to be the shit umbrella for the team, because the moment that you step away from the team, they are just going to step into the situation that often they had no idea about what was actually going on. So the way that I sort of focus on doing things now is I'm trying to set people up with enough context and the tools to sort of have their own personal shit umbrellas, so that when I do step away, then they're going to be better prepared to be able to deal with what's going on. But internalizing a lot of that, because I'm very motivated by fairness and treating people justly, particularly in the workplace. That was a big thing that I was focused on, about shielding people from just crazy stuff that happens. And while that worked to an extent, and certainly the people that that I was responsible for in that first position, they would say that I did a pretty good job of that. To be very blunt about it, when I left that team, 50% of the people left the team after me within 6 months. So to me, that was I managed to have 0% attrition in that team after Mike. So if you take Mike out of the picture, the first one that I totally messed up. But after that, the 12 people that we hired after that, kept all of them on for 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. And the fact that I stepped away and the team basically disintegrated, it halved in 6 months, and then within about 12 months, I think it was like maybe 1 or 2 people that were left by the time at the 12-month mark. That was a very difficult thing to deal with, because you hold yourself to a certain standard as a leader about how you are treating people and looking after people. And then when you step away and everything that you put your effort into building falls apart, then that is really useful information as for like how you need to do things differently in the future, so that when you do step away, either temporarily or permanently, that people are actually geared up to be able to look after themselves in that sort of environment.
Yeah. That's a great example, I guess. Not often we think about these things, we think like, how we can make things work, but we don't think like how we want to make sure that if we're not there, everything will still be working the same way. That's definitely not the first thing that comes to mind when we're thinking about the management role. I just gonna go through a few questions here. James is here. Great to see James here every week. Thank you for joining. Prasad is here. Great topic today. Thank you. Emily has a question, actually. Emily is asking, hi, which is more important for the team, do you think? The achievement of the team that you might have to push the team, or the happiness of the teammates? That result might be not that outstanding.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I don't view them as being mutually exclusive options. Like, I think that happy teams can achieve great things together. In fact, if you don't have a happy team, look, happiness can be a surface level thing as well, right? A lot of it comes down to psychological safety. Can we engage in conflict within the team that's about ideas and problems rather than interpersonal conflict? So being able to foster that sort of environment means that when times get hard, that you can actually, that you're going to be able to get through it, which makes that, when times are easy, then things are really good, right? You've got fair weather teams where everybody's really happy, provided that everybody's achieving results. But the moment things go south, then, the achievements wise and the happiness of the team drops off. Like, you'd argue that that's not a particularly effective team. So look, honestly, like what I focus on in different parts of my career where I've inherited other teams, or I built teams up from the ground up, is that focusing on the happiness of the team, making sure that you have a trust environment, like a high trust environment. There's a lot of transparency, a lot of visibility into like why decisions are being made, asking people to come along for the ride, even if you don't necessarily agree with the decision. But part of being in that management position is sometimes you have to make hard calls that people aren't going to like, and sometimes you can do everything right and still lose. So making, like, it's not so much the happiness. Like, happiness is a byproduct of having a high trust environment where you can engage in conflict and you can talk about the actual problems, rather than sort of paper over them. And in that sort of environment, that's how you build high performing teams, right? It's about having that safety to really start doing some of the best work that you possibly can in your career. And look, that's how I frame it with people as well. I say, look, I'm here to make sure that we can do the best work that you've done in your career so far. I definitely don't want it to be like the apex of your career. Like it's not downhill from here. It's just like, I want to show you how to do it better and how we could do great things together. But you've got to be happy while you're doing it. And you could totally be unhappy and achieve great things, but like, what's the point? Like, to be blunt, like we're working 8 hours a day, right? Minimum, particularly like if you're in the startup space. I've been in startups for the last couple of years. Like an 8-hour day would be phenomenal. Like I'm putting in a lot of hours. But if I'm coming in and I'm giving my all to an organization, that's 1/3 of my life that's spent, in a workplace. I'm gonna do the hard work to make it like at least pleasant for everybody while we're there, because life's too short. Like I definitely work to live, not live to work.
Yeah, definitely. So I think any question that includes things like happiness, it's always a difficult answer because firstly we need to describe, I guess, what happiness is, and happiness is different thing for different people as well. So I think it's for someone happiness could be just come to work, do your thing, and no one and make sure no one touch you, and I'm happy. Yeah. So and for some people that will be just disaster. So it's I guess a really, really difficult thing to define. That's why I think a lot of well-being programs fail as well, because it's so individual for everyone and for each team member as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like the different motivations for people as well. About like you've hit on something that's actually really key in distributed teams with people from different cultural backgrounds as well. Because in Australia we have a certain culture, a certain work culture, and it doesn't necessarily translate to people working in other parts of the world. And so what to you, the thing that you're interpreting from like how other people are feeling about work, somebody in a completely different culture, they might be like super happy, but the way that you interpret that is quite different because they're not displaying the same sort of cultural signifiers that you would expect in like an Australian workplace. So being like really aware of like what is like normal like work culture and work practice, and one tool that I use quite a bit actually is the SBS Cultural Atlas. They just make it available on their website, but it's basically like a really good primer for different cultures and like the do's and the don'ts and what's like acceptable, like communication styles and how people like to be worked with and that sort of thing. That's really important, and like particularly in a country like Australia as well, which is we're all migrants except for the First Nations folks that are here. Understanding where people have come from and what their cultural background as well can sometimes give you some interesting clues into what makes people tick in a certain way.
So, Lindsay, you mentioned a lot of those things about we start talking about understanding culture and understanding people's emotions, and with the questions about happiness comes up. But I guess coming back to that shift, yes, when we're talking about different cultures, emotions, and something, that's not something that you do, then you coding. so how people, if you're moving from this individual contributor technical role, what would be your advice navigating that shift from focusing on technical tasks, then suddenly overseeing teams and people? Did you receive any training, I guess, when you did it? Because most of the time, as we know, in a lot of companies, someone's doing a really good job, let's promote them, to leadership role without any particular training in place. So how to close this gap of like going from technical to leadership?
Yeah. Look, to be very blunt, and look, I'm just going to keep saying to be very blunt because I just am a very blunt person. I just like skipping to the end. Like I don't like to paper around things. Look, most organizations are not well suited to helping people manage that career transition. And the biggest misconception that engineers have when they're making that shift into that management role is that they perceive it to be a promotion, but it's not a promotion, it's a career change. So a lot of the things that you are doing on a daily basis no longer make sense to be doing in a management role. So, one of the big bits of a common trap that I see with people that are making that switch is that they say, oh, I'm not getting enough real work done every day. It's like, okay, you keep saying like you don't get enough real work done. what to you is real work? And the answer is like, oh, I'm not on the tools enough. I'm not like shipping enough lines of code. I'm not, getting stuff deployed out. I'm not spending time reviewing PRs and things like that. And to me, it's like those are great signs of like a good individual contributor, but like there's a reason that you're not doing that, right? And so the really common mistake that people fall into is that they accidentally take on two jobs because they think that they are having to continue performing at the level of an engineer, which a lot of organizations, like, they will capitalize on the fact that like people don't quite understand that there's a difference in that career change that's just happened there. So they're trying to work as an individual contributor, but then on top of that, they're trying to learn how to be a manager at the same time. And what ends up happening is just burnout, because you are holding yourself to an extreme standard of like, I need to continue to perform at the same level that I was as an individual contributor. And you use those signals for what you were incentivized on as an individual contributor, and you measure your ability to be able to do your job as a manager against those. But they're completely the wrong signals, right? It's not about your individual performance. It's about the performance of the team as a whole. And so, redefining what real work is, like, that is the starting point to actually making that transition. Because if you're going to hold yourself to who you were as an individual contributor earlier in your career, like, you are just going to be sad for the rest of your life. Like, that's simply how it's going to go, right? So detaching yourself from what real work is, like, the real work is the people work, right? Fundamentally in a leadership position, like particularly in like a technical discipline, there's like three parts to it. And this is something that I learned at Invado, which was a position I had a couple of years ago. I was working as an engineering manager there. And I inherited a team, and they had a really great model for talking about like what the responsibilities of a leader, an engineering leader, should be. So the first is people, the second is systems, and the third is delivery or execution. And they're in that order for a reason, right? Because people are, like, if you just look at the balance sheet of an organization, people are often the largest expense. And so if you have a huge engineering team, right, and you don't have effective management and leadership in place, then you are just pissing money away at that point. And it's no business wants to be in that. But so many businesses do that accidentally, and they don't realize that they're not getting the most out of their people, right? And then the system side is like, okay, making sure that there's good technical stewardship, that you've got the right architecture, that you're focusing on, deploying frequently, that you've got good monitoring and observability, all of those things, right? But even then, from a technical perspective of being an engineering manager, you're not looking at like individual changes on a day-to-day basis. It's more about the system as a whole and the interactions between different systems. And making sure that you're dealing with risks appropriately, that you've got on-call set up to be able to make sure that you're ensuring availability and reliability. And then the last bit is delivery, which is like, how do we actually combine the people and the systems together to be able to do great work and deliver features, fix bugs, and all of that good stuff. So those are really like the three different stands to it. Now, when you think about it from an individual contributor perspective, you don't have any of that people side of things. You really just focus on systems and just focus on delivery, right? But even then, when there's two of those three things are still the same between those different roles, the level of abstraction that you're dealing with as an individual contributor is very different to what you're doing as a leader as well, right? Because often as an individual contributor, like as an engineer on a team, you're focused about working on a single change at a time and getting that pushed out and deployed, right? And sometimes they can have like, far-reaching consequences. But as a leader, and being responsible for an engineering team that's working on products, it's not about the individual changes, it's about the behavior of the system in aggregate. And when we talk about system, we're actually talking about two things. It's not just the technical system, it's also the people, and it's the interactions between those things working effectively together. So really taking that step back and having to think big picture about, okay, what's the overall direction of the system and how do we get there and how do we get people motivated and buying into the vision, but also looking after their welfare at the same time. Like that's really like, that's the key at the end of the day. It's what everything boils down to.
Yeah, I really like, your example about doing the real work. Because, obviously you can have some days that I guess all you did like just had the meetings all day and maybe feel like there is no really progress, and it's all just it's all just talking. And I think that's sometimes how technical people see some non-technical people, like, oh, you just talk all day. at work. It's like, I don't know. That's how technical people sometimes see salespeople. Like, you just talk all day.
Right.
So,
And look, there's good talk and there's bad talk, right? Like if you're talking in a way that is like very focused and very directed and very like outcome driven, then the meeting is not a waste. But I mean, that's a whole other thing about like meeting discipline and meeting culture as well, which is like so many meetings are just, they could be replaced by an email or a DM, preferably like a public message in a Slack channel, something like that. But it's about like if part of doing the job as an engineering manager or an engineering leader is you're going to go to more meetings, and you also have the power to be able to say, do I really need to be here? Do we all need to be here? Like we're all given the same number of minutes in every day. It's just a question about how you actually choose to spend them. And like that's an interesting power that you have once you not elevate but make that career change into the management side of things, which is that like you do have the power to be able to say, hey, is this actually important? Do we need to be doing it like this? And sometimes the answer is but something that I know that like particularly at CipherStash, it's interesting going from like first employee after Dan, our founder, and sort of going through that journey over time and trying to unlearn a lot of the habits that you have from working in larger organizations as well. But like we're relentless in trying to cut out meetings, and like we shifted to like asynchronous stand-ups recently as well, which I've done before in other teams that I've led, and it's not worked well, but we seem to have just hit on a way of doing it somewhat effectively here. But like that just takes out, like it's a massive sink on everybody's time, because like when you turn up to a meeting, right, like you don't just turn up to the meeting. Like there's the 15 minutes of prep to get into the right headspace before you work into it. You've got to work out what you're going to say, who you need to talk to, and it's taxing on the whole team. And then you've got to come down from that as well. And then if you're an individual contributor, if you're doing the engineering work, well, I know that I've like got basically 2 blocks of time in the day. I've got my before stand up and after stand up, right? And so I'm going to have to manage my time. I've got the switching cost from thinking deeply about a problem to now thinking about meetings. And I'm going to go get lunch now, and then I'm going to do some more work later in the day. Like it has a large cumulative effect on the team as a whole. So, switching to asynchronous stuff, if you've got enough trust in the team and the system is working effectively, then that's one way to do it. But like that's the beauty about being in a management position, which is that you do actually have a fair amount of power that you can exercise over like how does delivery work, like how does the system as a whole actually function.
Yeah. Do you also find it challenging to stay up to date with technology, like since you moved to more like a managing a leadership role? So let's say you moved in 2010. Can you still code?
Yeah. I'm coding every day, and I'm like particularly being in a product role these days, but again, like very technically focused product role. I put a lot of my focus on working on things at the periphery of a system. It's never really working on the core, like the guts of the system. It's about like other things that are required for our system of work to actually work effectively. So like one type of code that I work on pretty regularly is like glue code. How do I take data from this system over here and this system over here? And like, it's a relatively trivial problem, right? But if you get an individual contributor, a software engineer that's working on stuff on a day-to-day basis, like it's so different often from the work that they're doing, having to think about that like it's actually like a bit of a detour, and it's not an effective use of their time. So I'll be down, I'll be writing code for glue code to be able to stick different systems together, but glue code is but I quite literally have a repository called Glue, and it is like got a different directory in it for each of the different systems that I'm gluing together. But like, funnily enough, like that's actually really similar to what you should be doing as a leader anyway, which is like you're being glue between different parts of the system and people, and getting them actually working together effectively. So like you can totally focus on the you can still cut code every day, but like, should you be cutting code? That's a much more interesting question. As for like keeping up to date though with where things are at, like I would argue that there's different levels of technical leadership. Like, if you're leading like a team or a squad, then it's much more important to stay up to date with what the latest and greatest technology is. But as you ascend further in the hierarchy within any organization, you go from an individual, like a manager of a team, to maybe like a senior engineering manager, and you're taking, you've got rather than having individual contributors report to you, you've got other managers that are reporting to you, or maybe you're like a group CTO or a VP of engineering or whatever. Like the further up you go in the hierarchy, I would argue the harder it is to be able to stay across that sort of stuff. I make really conscious decisions about things that I'm going to keep up to date with. There are some, like our stack at CipherStash, for instance, is all Rust behind the scenes. I can read Rust okay. I just know that I could spend a lot of time getting good at Rust, but it is not effective use of my time and the money that is spent paying me, right? So I just said, okay, that's fine. I'm just not going to get good at that, but I'm going to know enough that I can sort of understand what's going on, right? But there are other things that I know that there are capability gaps within the team, and I have to stay really, really down in the details of it. So on the observability and the monitoring side of things, I still work with Grafana and Prometheus and all those sort of tools. So there's stuff there that I still keep up to date with. And the other thing as well, being in the industry long enough, you tend to notice the patterns of things. So even if you don't know exactly how something works, you get a rough idea about how it actually works. So you find that when you work on enough systems over time, you can transfer knowledge from other things that you know about. But look, being in a product position as well these days, I spend a lot of time seeking out good information sources that will give me a good lay of the land. So, I listen to podcasts, and, that's good if you're doing the dishes or, driving kids to errands and after school activities and things like that. I spend a lot of time reading newsletters as well. They've got I actually have a category set up in my inbox of things that are dailies, things that are weeklies, things that are monthlies, and I've even written some automation actually behind the scenes that if I've got something that's tagged with a weekly and I haven't read it in 7 days, then you could just archive it because I'm probably just not going to get to it. Because your energy levels are all over the place, particularly in the startup world. So you're not always going to have time to be able to read everything. But you've got some known resources that you can fall back on, and that'll give you a good lay of the land about where things are at. So I focus on reading other information that people have curated that I trust are going to give me a rough idea about what's going on. And even people with differing opinions about things as well, people that are just got radically opposite opinions about AI and things like that. I listen to a lot of AI pessimism, but I also listen to a lot of AI optimism as well, right? And do I think that the answer is dead in the middle? No, that's a super naive way of looking at the world. The answer is never right in the middle. The answer shifts over time, right? But the point is to be plugged into different information sources that'll give you different perspectives. And so it's just about curation.
Yeah. We have quite a few questions coming up, Lindsay. I probably won't have time to answer all of them, but there's a few follow-up questions, I guess, on the last question. What do you miss the most after stepping up the management role?
Yeah, I mean, look, just the rush of being able to churn out a bunch of PRs and get stuff shipped to prod really quickly. I could do that if I need to, but it's not. I don't get the same. To be really blunt, I don't get the same dopamine hit from that every day. There are really clear metrics as an individual contributor that you can look at and go, yes, I'm actually having a real impact on the system. Whereas the signals that you look at and the dopamine that you get from being effective as a people manager, that is extremely delayed. And as humans, we are really bad with long feedback loops. And I'm sorry to say it, but that is what management is at the end of the day. It's about making a change and possibly not seeing the effect of it for 6, 12, 18, 24 months from now. And there's a lot of anxiety. I'm a deeply anxious person just in general. So working in a management position just amplifies that anxiety anyway. So you don't get the same dopamine hit from having that same technical impact. And you just need to find other places to be able to get it.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, I never actually thought about it this way. I guess I never work in a technical position, but I can see it. If you build something, it's right there. You can see it. But yeah, when you're working with the people, the result can can take quite a few months. And Emily have actually follow-up question on this. And do you feel under pressure when the teammate's technical skills is better than yours?
I mean, it's a bit of a self-help gimmick, but I never try and compare myself to other people around me. I compare myself to who I was 6 or 12 months ago. So, I just know that we're all going to have different strengths and different weaknesses. Like if I really need to know something about it, I'll put the hours in and I'll get better at it, right? But a lot of being in like a leadership position is actually just like being deferential, just saying, hey, I don't actually know that much stuff about this particular thing. I've had some previous experiences that are sort of like that, but I just don't know. Can you help me learn about that? And when you put when you make it clear that you're not the subject matter expert and there are other people in the team that are subject matter experts, it's an opportunity not just for you as a leader to learn, but everybody else around you, right? It's not so much like a load shedding activity of, I need to be really good at this and I've got too much on those, so I'm just not going to have to handle this anymore. It's like an investment in the team saying, hey, this particular person is really, really good about like search and how search works. So they're the subject matter expert, and part of their job, like particularly if they're a senior engineer, is to create other senior engineers within your organization. Like I firmly believe that like for senior and above in an engineering like career path, like one of the top things that's required of people in those roles is to create more people like them, right? And to be able to do that, a lot of that is just saying, yeah, I just don't know. Like, oh, okay, I've seen something that's sort of similar to this, but can you help me learn? And just being very open about that, not trying to bullshit your way through it. Like people to see through that so quickly as well. Like the number of like sales calls and stuff that you're in with people, and like you don't even use your product. Like I can tell that you don't use your product. Like engineers have a very good nose for when they're being lied to. So just don't lie. That's really, really easy. Like just don't lie and to say that you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Just that's a good strategy. Just say that you don't know what you don't know. There is no reason to dig yourself in the rabbit hole. Right. So there is the one question. Is actually a question that I wanted to ask you as well, and Prasad is asking it in the comments. What are some information sources you would recommend?
Well, let me bring up my little list of things. So one thing that I don't miss every day, I read basically the moment that comes out, is this little newsletter by Australian guy just down in Melbourne. It's called The Sizzle. And he just does it in his spare time. Actually, I think it's a bit more of a paid job these days, but like it's just a really great summary about where things are at in the tech industry. And also like he trawls like Oz bargains, so he finds like really good tech deals. So it's a great way to get your hands on new tech that it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg as well. So I pay a lot of attention to that every day. I operate in the site.
We can post the link later. If you send me a link, I can post it in the comments.
Perfect. Okay. Well, buckle up. You're gonna reach the character limit on YouTube and the number of things that you can put in the description. One of the other things that I pay a lot of attention to is the Risky Business newsletter. I work in like the cybersecurity side of things, so I find that to be a really good summary about where things are at. Also on the product side of things, I have got a subscription to like the Silicon Valley Product Group newsletter. So that's Marty Kagan, who's sort of like one of the leading lights in Silicon Valley in the product management side of things. Like I just like his big picture view of things. I also read TLDR Sec, This Week in Rust, DevOps Weekly. There's a whole bunch of them, but particular niche interests, things that I know that I need to be across. We'll post some links afterwards.
Yeah. And what sort of, I guess, resources or learning opportunities you recommend for someone who interested in transitioning to the management role? Yep. So if someone thinking about it, so what do you think they should try to read or learn before stepping in this management role?
Yeah, look, truly the foundational. I have three. Actually, I've got a lot of them. I'll try and boil it down to three foundational texts that I use. So the first one is the No Arsehole Rule by Bob Sutton. It basically talks about arseholes and how you've got to deal with them, particularly in the workplace. The second book is Good Boss, Bad Boss, also by Bob Sutton. And truly that is like my Bible for how I think about how to treat people. I've read it like multiple times. I read it like reread it every couple of years. And then the last sort of the last foundational text is "Turn the Ship Around" by David Marquet. So he's a really interesting fellow. He's used to be the captain of attack submarines in the U.S. Navy, and he basically inherited a completely dysfunctional crew and turned it around from the lowest performing to the highest performing in the US Navy in like a couple of years. And he talks a lot about like intent-based leadership. And so, yeah, those are the foundational texts that I use. But as for actually getting like more hands-on training, there are some regional ones from like AIM, the Australian Institute of Management. I've done a couple of training courses earlier on in my career, which, you know, you'd find that when you have read those sort of texts that you've got a good foundation for things, but there are just little gaps, things that you just don't know about. So I can highly recommend those sort of paid training courses. I strongly recommend doing them like in person as well if you can, because, you know, then you're able to interact with other people that are at that sort of stage of their career and find out their sort of experience. And like some of the other people that I was doing courses on were like managers of like playground equipment installation companies, so completely different to the tech space, but just getting their perspective on like how they do things, like that's really, really interesting. It's not just about the training that you get in the classroom, but the connections that you make with other people there.
Yep.
So yep. I strongly recommend face-to-face training, like particularly like anything in the city that you live in.
Yeah, definitely. Lindsay, so I'm just cautious about the time. I think, you know, it's time to start like wrapping up with the last questions. There's quite a few questions on the comments. They're all around like motivating people, influence people, emotional intelligence. So obviously that's like another big topic. I feel like now I know what topic I need to run next. So based on these questions, guys, stay with me. I'll definitely do something on leadership and emotional intelligence. There's a few of the previous live streams that we did on it. So if you scroll through the replays, I'll make sure to share those. Just quickly, Mohammed is saying that he can't see it on LinkedIn. Mohammed, LinkedIn is a funny platform. So we're definitely streaming on LinkedIn. We're getting some questions from there. But unfortunately, LinkedIn is really tricky sometimes to find some posts and stuff. So that's why, like, if you're not receiving notifications on LinkedIn, I think the easiest solution is subscribe to YouTube channel. So, because at least YouTube is always there and always all the replays in order and by the playlist. So, definitely for replays, I do recommend or join my meetup group if you're not there yet. So, Lindsay, okay, let's summarize. So we talk about a lot of things today, but what would be, I guess, so let's give some quick practical tips. Yeah, so we have someone who thinking to move from individual contributor to leadership management role. What tips you would give this person? Like, I don't know, 3 top tips before doing it, before moving.
Yeah, now you're asking the really hard questions. Only 3 things. Okay, well, I'll try and jam a couple of extra ones in there as well. Look, the first is the thing that I said just before, actually, which is like to reset your expectations about what you're doing. It's not a promotion, it's a career change. Your workplace will probably frame it in terms of, oh, it's a promotion. That is a trick. That is a trap to get you to do twice the amount of work. So when you're actually making that switch, it is a switch. It is legitimately a career change. So you need to look out for different signals. You're being incentivized on different things. You can't keep running at the same pace that you were doing previously. So that real work side of things as well, like that, you know, being able to redefine what that means for you is really, really important. Be really kind to yourself. Like, you're going to make mistakes. Like, I make mistakes. I've been doing this for a long time and I still manage to make mistakes. Big thing that I believe is only new mistakes. But so I don't want to try and repeat the same ones. But, you know, part about making mistakes is also being kind to yourself, to be able to go, oh, okay, actually I could have done this better. How would I do it differently next time? And the only way that you can do that effectively is like having other mentors around you as well that you can bounce ideas off. And look, the third and last thing is like, don't be afraid of asking like hard questions. Like, particularly in Australian business culture, we're very focused on, like, as a nation, we are just like, we've been indoctrinated to avoid conflict, like particularly in the workplace. And often like asking a direct question or a difficult question can be perceived as being a threat. But that's also, if you can get good at doing that, that will really set you apart from other people. Like there's plenty of it's a bell curve distribution for management, right? Like there's, I don't need to explain to you what like a normal distribution looks like. Like you know what that looks like. And so if you want to be right in the middle, like don't ask difficult questions. Like don't be difficult in asking questions, but like you have to ask hard questions. You need to get good at doing that. Like that will legitimately set you apart and differentiate yourself from other people that are applying for the same sort of roles. So don't shy away from that, but be kind to yourself while you're doing it.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned about the questions. That's coming up quite often in our conversations. And interestingly, yeah, so even if you it doesn't matter if you're in the client meeting and stakeholder meeting, it's always about, it's not as matter how much you prepared your presentation stuff. If you can ask the right questions, and if you can ask the challenging questions, that will definitely set you apart in a lot of situations. I think that skill of asking the right questions or asking challenging questions, it's often overseen, and people just don't think about it as an actual skill that you can actually practice it. It's not the rocket science. You can actually find a pattern of asking those questions and understand how you can improve it, and making sure you're using it when you're in the meetings.
Absolutely.
I'll definitely encourage all of you guys to think about it. That's one skill that could be easily learned and used in any situation. So before we finish the stream, Lindsay, we need to pick the winner of our giveaway. So, and obviously, giveaway is the exciting virtual coffee chat with Lindsay. So there's a lot of comments. I'll let you scroll through and choose the winner of the giveaway while I'm doing the announcement for next week. So next week, 30th of August, here we go. The winter is almost over. How exciting. So next week, 30th of August, we're going to talk with Sam, and we're going to talk about top tips for landing your first UX design job. So we haven't talked much about UX design on this channel, so I'm excited for Sam's presentations. I have actually quite a lot of people registered. Obviously, some new topics, so make sure if you know anyone who's looking into break into UX design, make sure to share this video with them, and make sure they join us next week on Wednesday. So, Lindsay, how are we going with picking the winner?
It's very, very difficult. Like you picked a lot of really good questions, but there's even better questions that are hiding as well. So, yeah, it's not fair. Yeah, why only one?
You can pick more. You can pick more, but look, it's
yeah. No,
there's
I
a
think
time
I'm going to
limit
go
on
with
everything.
Absolutely, that's right. Like we've all got the same number of minutes in the day, so it's a question about how we choose to spend them. I think the one that I'm going to go with is from Emily Howe. It's a different question to the one that you highlighted before, but it was, do you think a leader should also work on expanding the influence of your team? How did you do that? What kind of activities have you created for that? That's a lot to dig in there. Got a whole other hour that we can talk about that.
That's a loaded questions. That's why I didn't bring it to the stream, because it's like, that's a question for the separate stream. So Emily, I'm sure I'll find you a speaker just to talk for 1 hour about this. So we'll do it next time. And in the meantime, Emily, congratulations. I'll connect you with Lindsay, and you can have a virtual coffee chat with him and pick his brain about his leadership skills. Pravin saying, thank you, Lindsay, for sharing the tips. Thank you, Pravin, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And Lindsay, just to finish today's stream, could you please share with us like your favorite inspirational quote, or maybe just, I don't know, like the statement you live by, something inspirational for us?
Okay. I wasn't expecting this, but I've recently I've collected.
That's a surprise.
Thanks. I told you I was a deeply anxious person, Yana. What are you doing here? I've actually, since the beginning of the year, just realized I've got all these little quips and quotes that I just want to be able to refer back to. So I actually now just have like a note for just every good thing that I've ever yeah, that I've ever sort of heard. Look, there's again only one. You're
Only one.
really
I've
me
been
into a
doing it
corner
in
here.
my Instagram. I've been collecting the quotes on my Instagram. I'm like, what I can use Instagram for? I'll just collect the quotes, like every other person. So that's what I'm doing now. So if I need to find the quote, it's there.
All right, I've got one, and it's difficult to choose, but it's actually it's a Maori proverb. So I'm not going to say it in the Maori because I'm just going to totally butcher it. So I'm going to give you the English translation of it, which is, "What is the most important thing in the world? It's the people. It's the people. It's the people."
Perfect. Putting people first, I guess, and learning about the people as well.
Exactly.
That's I guess the key of our discussion. So if you're still thinking how to move to management role, it's people, people, and people. So I leave it. Let's leave it on this note today. Thank you, Lindsay, for great info and tips. James is saying thank you everyone for joining us again. And obviously, if you enjoy our stream today, make sure to like it, share it, subscribe, and all this, usual marketing fluff. So make sure to do it. So it will make a difference for me. So and it burns a calorie for you if you click the subscribe button. That motion, it's about like 1 calorie. So good for your health as well. So thank you, Lindsay, for joining me tonight. Thank you for your energy. I'll make sure I connect you with Emily, and I'll see everyone next Wednesday.
Yeah, thanks, Yana. Thanks, everyone.